Hello, we are going to be solving systems again, and this time we're going to be solving 3 equation systems with 3 variables. So it is going to be a little bit more challenging as you go through these problems and any other problems like this. The key is to make sure that you are organized. Take the space, take up the whole page of paper if needed. All right, first thing I'm going to do is write down this step-by-step process. And we can break this down into 4 steps. Might seem confusing at first, but once we get to a problem, we'll work through it. Now, remember, this is 3 variables and 3 equations. Generally, our variables are x, y, and z. So, step 1 is you're going to pick 2 equations. And you're going to eliminate a variable. Now, it doesn't matter which variable you pick. Just eliminate one of them. Step 2, you're going to pick another 2 equations. It cannot be the same 2 that you did in step 1. So let's say you picked the first and the middle equation. This time you're going to pick the middle and the last one, or the first and the last one. One of them has to be different. And you're going to eliminate the same variable. And that's the important part. You have to eliminate the exact same one as you did in step 1. So, kind of confusing right here, but it'll make sense once we get to an example. Step 3. Now what you've done is actually you've simplified your really, really large system. You started with 3 equations. Now you're going to take the 2 equations that you were creating from the first 2 steps, and they're going to create a new system here in step 3. And you're going to solve that new system. This new system is only going to be 2 equations, and it's only going to have 2 variables now, since we eliminated the same one in the first 2 steps. So now you've solved for, let's say you solve for x and y. You know those numbers. So in the very last step, you're just going to substitute the values into an original 3-variable equation. Since you've already solved for 2 of them, now when you substitute, there will only be 1 left, and you just solve for that final value. And that's all you have to do. Now your final answer, since there are 3 variables, generally x, y, and z, you're just going to write your answer like this. This just basically means we're in 3 dimensions if we were to try to graph any of these. And this would be a coordinate. The x-axis, the y-axis, and then our 3rd dimension, which is the z-axis. So let's go ahead and try an example. So here's our system. And let's go ahead and make sure that our z's and 2's do not look the same. So this is our original system. And now the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to pick two of these equations and eliminate a variable. So first step here, we are going to eliminate one of them. Doesn't matter, X, Y, or Z. Some might be easier than others, maybe less steps. Sometimes you may not have to multiply them together, do anything like that to make sure they have the same number, but it doesn't matter, just go with it. So I'm going to decide to eliminate Y. I think it's going to be the simplest because if we look at all of our Y values, they're all 5s. And we have a couple negatives and a positive. So if we play our cards right, we're not going to have to multiply these equations by anything. So I'm going to pick the first equation and the last equation. So write those here. And all we're going to do is we decided that we are going to eliminate Y. So let's go ahead and do that. We already see that the Y's are -5 and +5, so they will eliminate. So let's go ahead and add them together. The Y's will eliminate. So this is one of our new equations that we are going to save for later. This is not an answer, but we are going to save it for later. So write this down in a nice spot. So that was step 1. So we picked 2 equations, the first and the last one. And the step 2 was we need to pick 2 different ones. So now what we have to do is we have to pick the middle one and something else. For the same reason, I'm going to pick the third equation. So I'm going to write those 2 down. And we're going to eliminate the same variable. Make sure you do that. And we see that the Y's are already going to eliminate. If they weren't, we would just multiply both equations by something to get them to eliminate. Now this other equation will be very important again, so make sure you write that down. Step 2 is now complete. I'm going to go ahead and erase everything and keep going. This is the same problem still. Now, step 3 means we kind of have a new system, a simpler one. So I'm going to take those 2 equations that we just found from step 1 and 2. And now this is a new system. Now it's simpler. We have 2 equations and only 2 variables. This makes our lives a lot easier. From here, you just need to solve for these 2 variables, X and Z. In the other videos that we have seen, you can use substitution or elimination. You decide. Doesn't matter how. When you get to this point where you get to decide which method, it doesn't matter which one, because they'll both give you the same answer. I do believe that one is simpler or easier, whether it's your own personal preference or the numbers make it easier. So I see here that our Z's will eliminate if we add these 2 equations together. So I'm just going to stick with that. Those will eliminate, and I'll be left with -2x equals 2. So now I know that x equals -1. That is one of our final answers. The x is -1. Don't let that disappear. Because I know what x equals, I can substitute that value into one of our original equations here in our new system. So solving, I know that z is going to equal -4. So once again, this is one of our final answers. Now our last step is we need to solve for that variable we eliminated so long ago. At the very beginning, we got rid of y completely. Now we need to solve for it. So I'm going to pick one of the original equations. Might as well pick the first one. Doesn't matter which one though. This was the first equation from the original question with 3 variables. So I'm going to substitute. We found that x was -1 and that z was -4. Once we substitute those, y is our only variable left, so just go ahead and solve for it. Now we see that y equals -4. At this point, we have found all 3 variables. So our answer we're just going to write as a coordinate as x, comma y, comma z. Our x value was -1, our y value was -4, and z was -4. And that is our final answer. Once again, you can go ahead and check this. Substitute these 3 numbers into all 3 equations from the original question. If all 3 equal their respective numbers, you have solved it right. The 3 variable systems are the most challenging just because there's so much work that must be organized. For those of you that may not have the most organized work, please make sure that you are putting a space where needed, that you don't cram stuff in onto half a piece of paper or one little corner. Make sure you work through all of that.